Happy Friday, North Texas. I'm Scott.
And I'm Bess.
Today is Friday, August 29th, and we've got our first guest host of the season. Welcome to the pod, Bess.
Thanks, Scott. I am absolutely jazzed to be here.
We've had your interviews on the show before, but since this is your first time guest hosting, introduce yourself to the listeners.
So I've worked for UNT since 2016, and I've worked the last 2 years in media relations for the university. I'm also an alumna. I got my undergrad in 2013 and my master's in 2015. And today I'm joining the show to bring you an interview with Psychology Associate Professor Danica Slavish about how to get better sleep.
Great, but before we dive into the sleep tips, let's check in with Zach Babb for the Mean Green Minute.
A clean sheet was the name of the game for Mean Green Soccer on Thursday as they shut out McNeese in a 4-0 final. The first goal appeared quickly with Claire Niedermeyer scoring in the 18th minute. Ridley Reeves added a tally in the 52nd minute before Mia Bernard added to the scoring just 4 minutes later. Summer Brown also tallied a goal in the 86th minute. Soccer is now 3-2 on the year. They'll hit the road to face Oklahoma on Sunday before coming back home to face ACU next Thursday. Volleyball heads to Commerce to participate in the Lion Invitational this weekend. The team will face Arkansas, Little Rock, Providence, and East Texas A&M in the span of 3 days of the tournament. And football gets their season rolling at home this Saturday when they host Lamar and marks the start of head coach Eric Morris's third year at the helm in Denton. It's a 7 p.m. kickoff under the lights at DATQ Stadium.
Thank you, Zach. Excited for the first football game tomorrow. It's our faculty and staff appreciation game, so we can't wait to get out to DATQ Stadium to cheer on the Mean Green. Be sure to find Zach's other podcasts, GMG Cast and This Week in Mean Green Sports, wherever you get your podcasts. Bess, tell the listeners about the interview you brought us today.
Well, we just wrapped up our second week of the semester here at UNT, so hopefully our students have gotten back into a good sleep routine. But for anybody who's still struggling with that adjustment period, I spoke to Dr. Danica Slavish from UNT's psychology department for tips on how to make changes to your sleep schedule and some scientifically proven ways to fight off insomnia.
Most of us know it's important to get good sleep, but could you maybe give me some unexpected or maybe lesser known reasons why it's important to get that consistent good sleep?
Yeah, that's a great first question. So, like you mentioned, sleep has a number of health benefits. So, some of the kind of less maybe common effects that people might not be as familiar with include things like regulating immune function. One kind of really cool thing that sleep does is it actually sort of washes your brain of toxins that accumulate over the course of the day. So we have a lot of waste products that build up in our brains. So when you're sleeping, it's helping literally wash away those toxins and get rid of those from your body so that you can be your best functioning self. It also is involved in a lot of aspects of mental health as well. So it helps us kind of process emotional events that occur during the day. And it helps us create memories as well. So it helps us prioritize what information is really critical for our survival and what are those kind of memories or things that we've experienced over the course of the day that are less important for our survival that we can forget. So it helps you prioritize what memories to retain. So yeah, I think, it's really almost involved in every kind of physiological process that you can think of. Sleep plays a role in keeping us functioning.
And I think that's so interesting because I think a lot of us just kind of associate it with like, oh, it's like generally good for your health and of course for your energy. But that's interesting about the memory aspect and how that could actually like sort of almost like a survival or like, healthy thought process kind of aspect. That's wild.
Right, because your brain can only retain so much information, right? So it's really interesting how sleep helps us understand what are those things that we need to know for survival versus what are the things that are less important for us.
Wow. Okay, awesome. So, kind of obviously anytime like a work or just life schedule changes significantly, it's probably going to affect sleep, as well as, just everything. But I guess what would you say are some of the challenges of changing or altering a sleep routine? And I'm interested, especially if there are challenges that are unique to adults versus children.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think anytime we have a major life change, right, it tends to affect, health behaviors, including sleep. So a lot of people experience this when they're transitioning to a new job or a new, schedule as a result of going back to school. So it's a very common occurrence. But it can be pretty disruptive for individuals. So you might be, kind of forcing yourself to wake up much earlier than you had been previously, right? And go to sleep earlier too, which is maybe not the kind of normal circadian rhythm that a lot of people prefer. So your sleep schedule kind of becomes misaligned with what your circadian preference is. And that can be very, very disruptive for people. We see that in shift people who work at night shift workers as well. Um, but yeah, I think like you asked about the difference between adults and children. Especially for children, this can be, I think, really disruptive because children need, more sleep in order to function at their best than adults. So for younger children, adolescents, they need between 10 and 13 hours of sleep, and that can be really difficult for children, especially when they're being, kind of forced to get up really early in the morning to make an 8 o'clock, school start time. So there's been a push for kind of shifting those times later to accommodate children's sleep schedules. You can kind of know that something is off with your sleep schedule when you're seeing these effects in your daytime life. So if you're having problems kind of like with emotion regulation, you find yourself lashing out at people, you feel really tired or fatigued during the day, you can't stay awake, you have to take things like energy drinks or caffeine, that's really a sign that something is probably you're probably not getting the best quality sleep that you could. So if you're trying to kind of improve your sleep schedule, I think it's best to sort of make a gradual shift. So gradually maybe shifting your bedtime slightly earlier, and your wake time slightly earlier if you're trying to transition to a new sleep schedule. Making a drastic change is one very difficult for people, and usually it's not sustainable. So those gradual changes, over a longer period of time can make it easier to deal with some of those changes in your sleep schedule.
That leads really well into my next question. If there are any sort of indispensable tips for trying to kind of reestablish that healthy sleep routine, I would love to have some of those to share.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, like I mentioned, I think like, that gradual shift in a slightly earlier bedtime, slightly earlier wake time if you're trying to transition to, an earlier sleep schedule. So shifting your bedtime and wake time by like 15 minutes, maybe over the course of several weeks is a much better strategy than trying to go to bed, 2 or 3 hours earlier the night before you have to shift to that new schedule. So a gradual shift is important. And that even that can be very difficult for people if it's kind of not your natural or preferred sleep schedule. So if you find that you're not able to adhere to that, you're waking up a lot at night or you're having a really difficult time falling asleep earlier, what I would recommend is, and it seems kind of counterintuitive, but this is a strategy that is used in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, is get out of your bed if you cannot fall asleep within 15 minutes, or if you wake up at night and can't go back to sleep within 15 minutes. It's really critical that you get out of your bed because otherwise your brain starts to associate your bed with not sleeping. So
Oh, okay.
and it's interesting if you try this, I find that you really do feel a lot sleepier as soon as you get out of your bed. So if you are having difficulty shifting to that different sleep schedule and you can't fall asleep or you're spending a lot of time awake at night, get out of your bed, try to do some sort of quiet activity, reading a book or journaling or something like that. And then only get back into bed once you feel sleepy again. And again, people will be surprised. You really do typically start to feel sleepy as soon as you get out of bed and do something else.
Hmm.
So that's one of the kind of evidence-based strategies that we use for cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and it works for everyone too. If you're just having falling trouble falling asleep, um, that's one strategy that you can try. But the gradual shifting of bedtime and wake time is really critical too. And as much as you can, and this is not possible for everyone, but keeping a really consistent sleep schedule is one of the most important things you can do for maintaining good quality sleep, particularly a consistent wake time. Sometimes, if it's the weekend or you're not working or you're not in school, you might want to go to sleep a little bit later. But as much as you can, try to keep a consistent wake time, and that helps kind of program your brain, hey, it's time to wake up. It's sort of a conditioned response, and you'll find it like easier to fall asleep, to wake up. You'll get better quality sleep when you keep things, especially your wake time, as consistent as possible. Now, on the weekends, you might be shifting that a little bit, which is okay. But as much as possible, keeping that consistency is really critical.
Okay. And I know you said if you're having trouble falling asleep, get out of bed, do that quiet activity. And that reminded me, I know that I feel like it's relatively common knowledge now that we're supposed to try and kind of limit our use of screens close to bedtime. Um, is there um, like kind of a specific window of time that you would recommend people shoot for? And is that different for adults versus children, or is it kind of the same across the board?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's kind of varying research on that, but what I would recommend is like at least an hour within bedtime for both children and adults. I think more is probably better, so closer to 2 hours if you can. I know that's not feasible for all of us. But I would say at least an hour within bedtime, shutting off phones, laptops, because it's interesting. You'll find like when we're engaged in those types of activities, a lot of times it creates kind of like a high arousal state. So like your heart rate might increase, right? You might be doing like fun activities online or talking with people online, and that can really increase arousal, which makes it harder to fall asleep. And then there's also the blue light exposure as well, which suppresses melatonin. So I would say 1 to 2 hours within bedtime, for both children and adults. I'm not sure if there's any research showing differences between adults and children, but I think it's good practice for all of us to avoid that within a few hours of bedtime.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very guilty of that. I am one of those people who like comes alive at like close to bedtime and what was the term? I think I saw this on social media. I'm a big like revenge scroller where I'm like, I'm reclaiming my time that I wasn't doing what I wanted to do during the day. So I can
Right.
easily just like lose myself like, oh, I was supposed to be asleep like an hour ago. But I have found when I substitute reading a book in bed for doing that, things go a whole lot better. So
Yeah, and that's common. Sometimes people call that like bedtime procrastination. And like
yeah,
some people just thrive in those nighttime hours. That's when you're most awake. And that can make it more difficult, if you're a night owl, to get good quality sleep. So it's hard to work against your natural biological preference too.
yes, yes, yeah. I wish I could be a morning person, but it's a constant struggle for me.
Me
And I
neither.
think you touched on this a little bit too. It sounds like one of the biggest keys to maintaining the good schedule is the consistency. Um, are there other tips that you have for kind of keeping that good habit going throughout like the school year?
Yeah, I think especially for younger individuals, but also for adults too. A lot of people recommend having a bedtime routine. That works for some people. Some people don't find that they need that. But I think in general, kind of winding down before bed is good practice for all of us. So that includes, avoiding that blue light exposure. But also, avoiding psychoactive substances before bed too. Some people use those as ways to fall asleep faster, but it actually makes your sleep less deep and less restorative. Things like alcohol or caffeine, um, those can be pretty disruptive for sleep. So avoiding those sorts of things too. And then, again, that like getting out of bed if you find you can't fall asleep within a short window of time is really important too. That's called stimulus control, and it's one of the main components of psychotherapy for insomnia. And then, of course, like the other kind of things that we're already familiar with, probably like getting some sunlight exposure during the day and, good physical activity that can help with, maintaining a consistent sleep schedule as well.
Love that tip about getting out of bed if you're having trouble falling asleep. If I've got a lot of work stuff going on keeping me awake, it helps to get up and knock out one or two easy things off the to-do list. I always did it just to feel more prepared for the next day, but nice to know it's psychologist approved.
Yeah, that's been a good one for me too, and I love reading a book on the couch for a little while if I'm struggling to get sleepy. We'll have a link to my full story in the show notes for listeners to check out, and as always, you can get in touch by emailing podcast@unt.edu or calling 940-565-4341.
And don't forget to tell a friend about the show, share it on social media, or leave us a rating and review wherever you listen. Until next time, we hope you have a happy Friday, North Texas.
And go Mean Green!
Happy Friday, North Texas is a production of the University of North Texas. Today's show was produced and edited by Scott Brown with original reporting by Bess Whitby. For more information, visit unt.edu/podcast.